So good afternoon, everyone. This is Abaya from Jivamaya Yoga Wisdom Talks, here to introduce you to Michael Lee, who is the founder of Phoenix Rising Yoga Therapy. So Michael has had a very long career in yoga and yoga therapy with a focus on psycho-emotional health, this is spanning about 33 years now. And prior to coming to the States in 1984 to pursue yoga, Michael was an academic and consultant in the behavioral sciences. He founded Phoenix Rising Yoga Therapy in 1986. You can do the math. It was about I think it is the first yoga therapy school here in the States. Amazing. Nobody had even heard of yoga therapy at that point. And it was based on his learning and integration of yoga and the elements of contemporary psychology, now supported by neuroscience. Michael is the author also of two books, Phoenix Rising Yoga Therapy, Bridge from Body to Soul, and Turn Stress into Bliss. He is also the contributing author of American Psychological Association, the published book Beyond Talk Therapy, using movement and expressive techniques in clinical practice, which, quite frankly, in that one sentence, pretty much describes what Phoenix Rising is all about. And it goes on forever with all of these amazing keynote speeches that he did 2016 at Sitar, 2018 at the Yoga Australian Conference, the Japan Yoga Therapy Conference, the first global consortium of yoga therapy in Sendai, Japan. Quite amazing. Michael and his wife, Lori, are parents of 5 children, and they live in Massachusetts. So let's welcome.
Wow.
This is awesome. Wow. That was a mouthful. Even for somebody from New York, that was hard to say that too fast. So welcome and thank you for being with us. I know your teaching schedule is really quite huge. So I appreciate your time so much.
It's great to be here.
Your story of how you began Phoenix Rising Yoga Therapy is fascinating. And I was wondering if you might be able to sort of share some of the salient points of how Phoenix Rising Yoga Therapy really came about.
How it came to exist, yeah.
And maybe you can kind of answer at the same time what exactly psycho-emotional health means.
Well, I'll tell the story first, and then perhaps it might have a little more meaning to it. But yeah, I was working in a college in Australia, and I had the good life. I was living the suburban lifestyle with the cars and the kids and but I wasn't really happy. I wasn't fulfilled. There was something missing. I didn't know what it was, but there was something just, is this all there is, And around about that time, a couple of swamis came to a college where I was teaching, and they said, we want to run a course on yoga. What do you think? And I had a little bit of influence, and I thought, well, why not? That sounds like a good idea. So I set it up, and I started to hang out with them a little bit and took the class myself, and then they invited me to the ashram, and so I used to go there before breakfast sometimes and practice. And anyway, I started a home practice, and I'm doing my home practice one morning. My daughter she's looking at me. She was watching me for a few days, and she said, Dad, I really like when you do that stuff. And I said, why? She said, well, when you do that, you're not so grumpy anymore. and I'm like, wow, right? Because it's interesting, because my profession is about how people change behavior. That's what I'm teaching, behavioral science. And here's my daughter telling me I change when I do a few yoga postures and some breathing techniques.
Wow.
And so I'm thinking maybe there's something to this, because a lot of the courses that I used to run were for people in industry and organizations. And they'd come and do these wonderful courses, stuff that came fresh out of Esalen and Tavistock in the UK, really the latest management and behavioral psychology and whatever. And they'd have a great time, but then they'd go back to work and it'd be the same old, same old. There was something that was just missing. Some sort of little switch hadn't really gone off, And I thought maybe it's about the body. Maybe it's about yoga. And so I got really fascinated with that, and I studied more, read more. And then came up due for a sabbatical, so that I thought, why not? Well, I'm going to go and study this. Now I had to be pretty creative in the grant writing process to get leave to go and study yoga, because what I really wanted to do is go live in an ashram and just try it out for myself. And anyway, I got it approved, and I got an approval to do a self-study, living in an ashram or a yoga center of some kind. Found Kripalu. I was living in Australia, and I asked a friend, where do I go? And I was going to go to India. And he said, no, go to America. There's a lot of great yogis in America that they've gone there in the last 10, 20 years, And so I researched that. Sure enough, I found Kripalu Center, and they actually had a program where you could do an external degree while you lived in the ashram, I found out years later that I was the first and only person that ever took that program. But even so, it was great. So I became my self-study, and anyway, about 6 months into it, I took my family. They moved into the ashram too, so we were a little family pod. Not many people with families there, but we did it. And then about 6 months into it, Don Stapleton was my mentor, and you probably heard of Don from way back. He's still around in the circuit somewhere. And so he and I were working together, and we were trying out some different, assisted postures and breathing techniques. And we were very interested in pratyahara, like really what was pratyahara, and so we were playing with that a little bit. And I was he was working with me, and I was against a wall in a triangle posture. I got to that place, like the edge, not too much, not too little, just kind of right. And I was breathing and hanging out in the posture and focusing in, like we were using this inward focusing technique, into the sensation, into the feelings, into what's happening in the body. And all of a sudden things started to change. And I noticed a lot of emotions started to come up, and a lot of interesting phenomena like colors and different feelings and different sensations. And it wasn't anymore the physical posture. Like it wasn't the discomfort of the posture. It was this other internal discomfort that I was experiencing. But in between the discomfort, there was also periods where it was pretty good, And so I was but it was a little scary. So I was at the point where, okay, let's get out of this and do the next posture. And he said, no, just stay there. And he put his hand on my chest, just put it there. And he said, breathe and stay there and go back in. And so I did. I went back in, and I was with it. And all of a sudden things started to change. And I felt like, wow, this is not so bad. And it felt like I could stay there. And it felt very peaceful and blissful. And so I thought, I even started to tear up. I was crying, but it wasn't tears of pain, or it wasn't tears of even joy. It was, I don't know what it was. And so I came out of the posture, and we sat on the floor to talk for a little. He said, I'm sorry, I got to leave you. And so here I am, like I wasn't ready to come back to the world at all. And I just really, really needed to hang out with someone. So I went back to my room, next best thing I could do, and I started to journal write about what had happened. And because I was keeping a journal for my dissertation. And so I started just free write. And I remembered one of the things that came during the experience was this. I had this image, this distinct image of being the small boy getting beaten up at school by these bullies, and I thought, and I felt the trauma of it. I felt the pain of that experience viscerally, and relived it a little bit. And then I started to write about that. And I just wrote the words, afraid of big people, right? And I looked at that and I thought, wow, I've been living my life for 30-something years afraid of big people. And I could see how it played out in my life. Like anyone who had power or control wasn't just big in stature or big in size. It was big in terms of power. So anyone who had power over me, I was like, and I sorted my world into two groups of people. There was the big people and the not big people. I hung out with the rebels and avoided the big people. And so I thought, wow. And then I noticed over the next couple of days, my body has shifted. I felt an openness across my chest. I started to walk differently. And I started to look people in the eye in conversations, even some of the big people, and actually talk to them and engage. And I felt after a day or so, I thought, I'm not afraid anymore. There's no fear left in my body. It's gone. And I hadn't really done anything or used the usual process of trying to figure stuff out. I hadn't figured anything out. It just happened, you know. And I thought, wow, this is really powerful. This is something in this. So I set about trying to find out what are all the little things that were part of this experience, what helped make it possible. And so after I'd isolated some of those things, I started to try. I thought, there's a practice in this. And I started to try it out with other people. And surprisingly, everybody had different kind of experiences, but they were all good. They were basically a lot of people that I could get to really drop into that deep level of present-centered awareness in their body, hang out there for a while, use some of the dialogue techniques that I'd learned as a behavioral scientist, so I'd be having a little dialogue conversation with them, but keeping it present-centered, keeping it in the now. And then at the end of it, engaging them in a process of reflection and integration like I'd done through journaling, but I used basically a verbal process with people I'd tried it out on. And it was pretty amazing. People were like, yeah, wow. And one guy who used to cry every morning in the ashram in class suddenly figured out that he was carrying a load that he didn't need to carry anymore. And his body shifted, and it was just pretty powerful. So I thought, this is good enough. This is what I'm going to do, And so I ended up going back to Australia. I resigned from my teaching job and became a yogi. And here I am 34 or 33, 34 years later, I think almost 35 years later. And it's been a great ride. It's the work developed into what we call Phoenix Rising Yoga Therapy.
Let me ask you a question then. So a lot of research has been done in this 33-year
Yes, since then, yes, yeah.
So how have you incorporated that? This is not a question we discussed, so sorry,
yeah,
on the spot.
That's all right. I would say, rather than say incorporated, let's say I've understood more what happened to me.
Okay.
Yeah, and neuroscience. If you look at the things like now polyvagal theory, right? There was a definite downregulation. There was a definite slowing down of the central nervous system, and there was and the other part of it, which is really cool, all the neuroscience around present-centered and narrative referencing, right? So most of the time are referencing out of our narrative, our story, right? And when we drop into that deep place, we're then referencing differently. We're referencing from present-centered awareness, and then the shift as well. That's sort of a creation of new neural pathways through the visceral experience. So a lot of the neuroscience, and I'm sort of skipping over a lot and making it very kind of light, but a lot of the neuroscience has in fact confirmed what the experience was. And validated, I guess.
Polyvagal theory is something that just totally opened my whole mind. It was suddenly things became very clear to me about PTSD and different imbalances of the mind and where people go when you say something to them and you've triggered them somehow and they're like somewhere else all of a sudden and you're like, where have they gone? So it was fascinating. So with the Phoenix Rising, if you're working with a client who actually has one of those experiences, do you allow them to work through it, but you're there
it's a lot. Well, one of the important elements is safety. So you can't go into that kind of an experience if you're not ready for it and it's not safe, right? So a lot of our work with people who aren't ready is to help them get ready, and also along the way create a sense of safety so that they can engage themselves at that deeper level. Most of us who have suffered some terrible thing in the past where our body's been involved, the last place we want to go is our body. And so it's counterintuitive in a way, but if you take like Bessel van der Kolk's work, I mean, he says clearly that if you're going to resolve trauma, the body's got to be involved. It's got to be there, and there's truth to that. But it needs to be safe, and of course, it's not a standard thing that we just apply this practice to everybody. It's geared for the client, where they're at, taking into account what's going on for them right now in their life and how they can begin to engage that deeper level of self-presence and to sort of slow down and even stop to some extent the fluctuations of the mind, as Patanjali called it, right? And this approach to yoga therapy is a great way to slow down those fluctuations of the mind, and through that have an experience of self that's at a much deeper, visceral, present-centered place. Yeah.
Even just beginning with the awareness that there is that place, that there is,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
who's
Yeah.
for.
Yeah.
So in these challenging times that we have, I know that there is a lot of concern about quote unquote mental illness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And an associate of mine, a yoga teacher, was saying in the studio the other day, we were having a staff meeting, and she said, I said, how are you kids doing? And she said, oh, they're doing fine. And I asked about the homework and everything. She said, you know, it's really interesting. The school said not to worry about any of the homework, that when they came back to school, they'd be able to catch up. But what we should be concerned about and be paying attention to is their mental stability, and that
Yeah.
we should be creating that in the home, and that would be the main concern at this time. And I found that very, very interesting. So, for the Phoenix Rising Yoga Therapy, what are you finding most right now with these incredibly challenging times that we're living in?
Yeah.
Which is great. There is a huge opportunity for us, but
Oh
this,
yeah. Oh, absolutely. If yoga therapists were ever more needed, it's now. You know, there's no question about that. Particularly in the psycho-emotional realm, because if you just think about it, like in the last 100 days, the world has changed in two big areas, right? They're both big. They're separate issues, like the whole COVID thing and the whole terrible events that have been brought to our focus, but have catalyzed a whole re-examination of racial injustice and the need for social change, desperate need for social change. So we're all being called upon to change. First of all, with COVID, we're all called upon to change our behavior, the way we behave. That if you're not used to change, that's tough. That's hard. Yeah. And then now we're being called on, and particularly, people like myself included, like where do I sit in regards to being, where's my behavior that could be white supremacist, and I need to look at that. I need to take a good look at my own behavior and see how I may unconsciously or even unknowingly play in to a scenario that is causing severe harm in our world. I've got to be open to change. And that's tough, because sometimes I just don't know where to go with that.
right.
And a lot of people don't know where to go with any of this. Either end of the 100 days that we're talking about, it, however long it's been. So one of the things that does help is to be able to separate out from all the turmoil that's going on and find that place of stillness and knowing from the inside, and to be able to see what's happening in the world through I would call it, not only see it, but experience it through a different lens. Because the lens that we use to experience the world and to make sense of the world is one that we've been used to. And it's got a lot, again, to do with thinking things through and like trying to second guess and trying to figure stuff out, right? And a lot of this stuff that we're faced with now, you can't figure it out. You got to be present to it before you can figure it out. You got to embrace it. You got to go through the uncomfortable burn of being challenged. You've got to go through the uncomfortable burn of adjusting and changing when you don't really want to. And so in order to find the wherewithal to do that, we've got to begin to experience things in a different way. And the body is a great way to do that. And present-centered awareness is a great way to do that. And engaging the practices of yoga is just a way to help to create that different way of seeing things, different way of being with things, so that we're not reacting so much. Rather than reacting, we're responding. And what we now need to do to all the things that are happening in our world is to be responders, not reactors. And that's a tough call, because you've got to pause for a moment. You've got to pause and let things settle before you jump. And I think yoga therapy in particularly from a psycho-emotional perspective, really helps build that, really helps people get used to self-referencing and being present to the world in a different way. I mean, I know personally my own practice has been a priority over the last 100 days. I mean, every day, like there's not a chance I'm going to miss it, because if I do, I'm probably going to lose it if you at least half a dozen times during the day.
Well, in a sense, this is what we have been practicing for,
Yeah.
so that we can be there and be here and be strong. And so when somebody come, when what are you finding though in the students and the clients? Is there sort of one or two emotions that really seem to pop out on a rather consistent basis?
Yeah. There's a lot of anxiety,
Yeah.
a lot of anxiety, and I've seen this in myself. Like COVID, I don't know if I'm going to die. I'm in that age group where if you get it,
Me too.
it's
Yeah.
not good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So so coming face to face with your own death, that can create a lot of anxiety. Yeah. For a lot of people. So that's there. Change, fear of change, fear, a lot of fear. Will things go back to normal? And no, they won't. And how am I going to be with that? Right. And then the horrific things that we saw, with George Floyd's death. I mean, killing. That was just to see that live on TV. I mean, that's disturbing. That's very, very disturbing.
So when a client comes to you or a student comes to you and is definitely portraying these emotions, how does the yoga therapist from Phoenix Rising, using that Phoenix Rising yoga therapy method, where do you begin with that? How do you
Yeah,
start?
yeah. Well, for starters, we'll have a little talk. We'll set the scene, and get to know a little bit about who we're with and what's going on for them. And then as soon as we possibly can, we'll begin to engage breath and body, right? Breath and body in some movement. Uh, and that's really just at a very gross physical level, because our whole work is, because it's body based, we're using the body as the vehicle. We've got to get comfortable being in it to start with, right? So that's the starting point. And then we'll take them into a sequence of usually assisted yoga postures if we're working one-on-one hands-on, but now we're doing all of our sessions online, so it's using words to help guide the person into an experience of their body similar to the story that I described, to a place where they can begin to, we use the term dropping in, to the place where they can drop into more present-centered embodied awareness rather than the story narrative and like being outside of their body. So it's really to help bring people into their body, and then to be open to what arises for them, because what often will arise is some of those feelings that are causing the difficulty, that are not looked at. Because one of the best ways people use to get away from feeling what they're feeling is either to deny it or avoid it, right? So there's a lot of denial and avoidance going on. But here, you can't, once you come to your body, the body always tells the truth, right? So it's going to allow that feeling to come, but it's going to come in a way where it can be safely contained and be present to it. And the invitation is to be with it, to be open to all experience. All experience is there for us to help us to learn, to change, to grow. So in order for it to do that, we have to welcome all experience, right? And so then we'll see where that goes, and we'll take it from there. And then we, of course, integrate it, see, and often out of that experience, insight and wisdom also arises. We can begin to see things that we couldn't see before. Like someone just recently came to, after one session, like, yeah, it's a troubled world right now, but here right now, I'm safe. And I can be present for this if I can find my center, if I can come back to this place of being and knowing that in this moment I'm fine. Then I can respond to how do I need to show up for this? What's the next thing I need to do? And believe it or not, it comes down to a few very simple things, because once you start uncovering fear and you flip fear over, on the other side of it is love. So where a lot of people come to through the experience of the work, through their body, yoga therapy in this kind of form, they come to a place of greater compassion, greater willingness to open, greater willingness to be present for change, greater desire to love and support and to serve, all of the kinds of things that we hold as ideals. But it's a little different when they actually come from the inside out, when they arise from the inner experience rather than just being all good things we should do that are planted into our head. So it's a bottom-up approach rather than a top-down.
So, in essence, you're also really teaching them how to listen.
Absolutely. Listen to yourself for starters,
Yeah.
and then, listen to others. Yeah. And we give a lot of listening. One of the things that a big part of our training is learning how to listen, really listen for the essence. What's someone really saying? Yeah.
Amazing. That's beautiful. So I know you travel a lot. You've been teaching in Japan. I know, I mean, you really do travel pretty much throughout the world, and you're teaching everywhere you go. What are some of the differences that you're finding in different countries, from the point of view of the students, from the point of view of their attitudes, from the point of view of their cultural background?
Yeah. Yeah. It's really funny you should ask that, because I was thinking about that just the other day. And um, I was listening to a Dharma talk and it was Gil Fronsdale, and he was talking about selfing and theming. And it made me think about our culture and how, in many ways, we're pretty big into the self, into the I, me, and mine. And I thought about that in relation to Japan. I've been probably over the last 5 years, I've been to Japan 6, 7 times, I guess. And you lived there for a while, so you know it well too. And even just the language, like in Japanese, the word watashi wa means I, right? And it's watashi wa. It's got 3 or 4 syllables. And it doesn't roll off the tongue quite so easily as I. And surprisingly, what I learned was it isn't used that much, because referencing is more from a collective than an individual. So the whole Buddhist concept of no self, the Japanese have it almost inbuilt into their language. And that fascinated me. Little things like that really fascinated me. And then things like ikigai, which is like your reason for being here, your reason for being alive. Like, what's your purpose in life? There's a deep appreciation for that in the Japanese culture. And then in Taiwan too, the respect for elders, how elders are so respected in Chinese culture. So these things really fascinate me. And it's like, in many ways, it's like a breath of fresh air. But I mean, every society has its underbelly as well. So, I can remember in Japan trying to get students to give each other feedback was like, I mean, it was a tough job. They did not want to give each other feedback because there's this huge fear of shaming the other person, right?
Yeah.
So it's there's just differences, I guess, but it's beautiful, and I think for me personally, it's very rewarding, because being open to that and really seeing my work in the context of those environments and needing to adapt it to the culture as well. It's been one of the greatest things I've done in the last 5 or 6 years, And you're right, I travel a lot, but in the last like 3 or 4 months, I haven't been anywhere. I've been in my living room right now, or in my office where I am right now. Yeah. But I do look forward to traveling again, but it probably won't be anytime soon.
I remember a while ago, there's a school here called the Meadows School that was actually started by our current mayor, Carolyn Goodman. And Steve Wynn gave the graduation speech, and he had just come back from China. And this was a class where every single person there had the highest scores you can get on your SATs and all your exams. They I mean, they're all financially very well off, but every single one of them had scholarships to Stanford and Harvard and Yale and yada, yada, yada. And he turned around to them and he said, as smart as you are, when you get to college, you will find that those from Japan, those from China, are going to be smarter than you. There was this silence in the gymnasium. It was like, how could anybody be smarter? And he said, because they're hungry, they want it more.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, so what I am asking you as a class is to bring that American spirit, to bring that sort of wonderful entrepreneurial, the,
Right.
the
Right.
rainbow, that whole beautiful spirit that America has, which I sense, and I mean the sense I'm working out to a question. I'm sensing that we don't really have that much anymore. And what I'm finding with COVID is that we've actually gone back to recognizing what our ancestors went through for this country to be this country. And,
Yeah.
and I'm wondering if this is, I think we're very fragile now. And I
Yeah.
don't know
Yeah.
I don't know, we don't seem to be able to sort of, excuse the expression, but take orders. We don't have that same discipline. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I'm wondering if you're finding that at all.
Well, yeah, it's recently, I mean, I kind of undervalued that part of my yoga experience. Like, I lived in an ashram for close on 2 years. I got up every morning for 100 and no, it was more than that for it was a year and a quarter, 15 months, right? Every day for 15 months. I don't know why 15 months was chosen as the time period, but that's what it was. And to commit to daily practice. And it was the same practice every day, same postures. And I was one of the teachers, and I went, a group of us got together and went to the guru, and we said, what about we change it up a bit and put in some more different postures? He said, why would you want to do that? He said, well, people kind of get bored with the same postures every day. He said, if you're getting bored, you're not paying attention. And it was like, oh my God, yeah, he's right, And so it was like, you're not doing the same posture every day. It's a different posture every time you do it. And you have to get to be so present that you can notice that. Right? And so I often laugh now when people sort of say, oh, I don't want to do the same practice. I don't want to. And even changing behavior, it takes at least 30 days before you're going to know if doing anything is of any value to you or not. Like my most recent practice is getting up before sunrise. I get up before 5 a.m. and I get out and I walk. I do a 3-mile walk before I come back and do my yoga and meditation. It gets to be a pretty long practice, but I love it. It's great. But and someone said, you're going to really notice the difference getting up early. And I remember when I used to do that in the ashram, and it does make a difference. And
I
so,
call that dinacharya.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so now I've been doing it, and after it didn't take 30 days. After about 2 weeks, I really felt the difference. I could feel it in my own body. But if I'd have got out there the first morning and tried it and then said, this doesn't work, and then the next morning just, damn it, I'll just stay in bed, because that's what I felt like doing for the first week at least. I felt like, oh, what am I doing? This is tough. But now I just wake up and I'm out the door. It's like no problem at all. This is what I do, but it took a while. And it takes that little bit of a commitment, a little bit of a focus. And I think that kind of gets missed a little bit in our yoga world, in a more comfortable culture like we have, and so I also love and value the part of our practice that is more open and more, really takes into account and validates the beautiful individual experience, and each person is unique. So that's got to be valued too. But there needs to be a little substance underneath it. Right. And so, I'm leaning more into, I guess our students probably won't like it if they hear about it, but leaning into a commitment to at least a 30-day consistent practice at the beginning of our training. Yeah.
Well, anyone who wants to take the Ayurveda course through Phoenix Rising Yoga Therapy will get me as their teacher, and I will tell you right now that there is a commitment.
Yes, you do a great job with Ayurveda. That's wonderful. Abby is our Phoenix Rising Ayurveda teacher and runs a great online course. Yeah. And we also have our essentials training now online, that's been one of the wonderful parts of this whole experience is getting to teach online more and really getting to love it. And I see we have, I think, Marianne on here in the chat has taken our current course. And so anyone else that's watching or listening, if you're interested in learning a little bit about yoga therapy from the Phoenix Rising perspective, the psycho-emotional approach, we've got an online essentials course. It's over 15 hours, 16 hours over 2 weekends, and it runs every month. There's one every month, and a new one every month for the rest of this year. So you can find us on pyt.com, if I can
Yeah.
plug that.
I can't recommend Phoenix Rising highly enough. It's a beautiful, beautiful program. So, Michael, we're actually about 5 minutes over. So, I would like to ask you, what is the one takeaway that you want anyone who's been watching this to take with them?
Oh, wow, that's a good one. Every day, just take a moment to check in with your body, breathe, move, get in touch with your body, and place your hand on your heart and just ask yourself this one question: how do I want to show up for my life today? Yeah. How do I want to be here? What matters? What really matters? Yeah. And let that just guide at least some of the direction.
Thank you.
Even if it's only for the first couple hours, doesn't matter, or even the first 20 minutes. It's intentionality. It's just I think that's big for all of us now. When asking ourselves, what is it we want to create in our life and in the world? Yeah. And then using your body as a way of getting in touch with that.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Abby. I think it's been a pleasure to be your guest. I've loved every minute of it and love chatting to folks. And yeah,
We
thank
so
you.
appreciate you being on. And next week, Wednesday at the same time, we will be welcoming Arun Deva, who is an Iyer yoga therapist. What does that mean? I'm not going to tell you. You're going to have to tune in. And Arun is delightful and will sh- really share with us wisdom of Ayurveda, which is just so profound and so beautiful. And I can't think of anyone who can do it better than he. So I want to thank Michael again. Thank you so, so much. And I hope you all have a lovely evening. My very best to Lori and all of the
Thank
children.
you. Thank
Yeah,
you. And everyone who's watching, be well.
exactly. Namaste, one and all. And this will be on YouTube as fast as I'm able to do it with my very limited knowledge here. So thank you, everybody. Have a lovely evening. Namaste.